This episode of UK Low Carb Podcast is sponsored by Deliciously Guilt-Free. Enjoy the show.
Hey everyone, and welcome to UK Low Carb. I'm really honoured to have a series with my good friend, Dr. Jen Unwin.
Hi everyone, so pleased to be here. Yeah, we're hoping to tempt you all to come along, interest you to come along to the first International Food Addiction Conference on May the 20th in Bristol as part of the annual PHC Public Health Collaboration Conference. So yeah, we're going to be doing a series on food addiction, sugar addiction. We might have that debate about what to call it, and it's going to be great.
Excellent. So join in each week where Jen and I will be going through different topics to do with addiction, and at the end you get to ask your questions in a live Q&A as well. So without much further ado, let's get on with the show. Welcome back, everyone. It was fantastic last week having Jen Unwin on the show, and we were talking about how you can look for the symptoms of addiction in your life and those around you. And I'm really pleased that on this series we're doing on addiction, Jen has come back to now go into a bit more detail about how does it work, this stuff, addiction? How does it work with regards to food addiction? So welcome back to the show, Jen Unwin. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, Dan. I really enjoyed our chat before, and it just brings up so many things, doesn't it, that we remember in our own lives when we go through those sort of criteria. So the question for us this week is how on earth can food, that's what people say, how on earth can food be addictive? We have to eat, don't we? Yeah, we have to eat. Okay, so there's a number of sort of broad issues, and then we'll talk particularly about the brain biochemistry, if you like. So yes, we have to eat, don't we? And we have to survive. We touched on this last time. That when we eat certain things like that are they have a very sweet taste, or they're very sugary, that does release certain neurotransmitters in the brain, particularly dopamine. And dopamine is the neurotransmitter that's very involved in habit and very involved in addiction. So any other addiction, is going to involve the sort of dopamine systems in the brain. And again, this makes complete sense, doesn't it? Because we had to be motivated. So dopamine is to do with motivation. We had to be motivated to go out and find, the berries and the honey. If we could find it, we would get a sort of massive boost, and we'd feel a bit sort of invincible, and we'd remember where it was. And, so in evolutionary terms, it makes complete sense that we're wired to eat those things. So we survived through the winter. So when they were available, we found them. We remember where they were from last year. We were really motivated to go and get them. We ate them. We were delighted to have them again. But of course, winter never comes, number one. And number two, it's not just a little bit of honey that's 4 miles away. It's a rack of cream eggs. Those are a bit seasonal. Those are a bit seasonal, actually, but it's a rack of Kit Kats, isn't it? As you go to the garage, as you go, it's just everywhere. We don't even have to try, and our brains kind of light up when we see that stuff, because we think it's to do with survival. It's a very primitive part of our brain. So there is this sort of evolutionary benefit. So there is for some of us, and we mentioned this again last time, this genetic component. And often when I talk to people with this issue, they have people in the family that also had this sort of food addiction type tendencies, or potentially had a problem with alcohol. Quite often when we talk to women with food addiction, they recognize that their dads may have had a problem with alcohol or other addictions. So there's probably a genetic component. There's also, on the psychological side, obviously the kind of family and the cultural side of things. How was food used? Was it used as a kind of reward? Was it used as a comfort, as a love thing? When you got out of school, you were allowed a treaty lollipop, or if you banged your knee, you got a cookie out of the cookie jar. It's kind of soothing. So you get these kind of really strong habitual links with certain situations or feelings that then, when we're in that state again, we get those cravings. I was talking to someone that was fascinating, and she'd been at boarding school. Boarding school actually is a breeding ground for food addiction, partly because of the kind of food. The kind of foods that people get fed are very carby, sweet, kind of mash
Yeah.
and pie and things like that. And also, if kids have gone very young, they're vulnerable emotionally, and they'll be using that. They use that food as a comfort. And someone
Right.
in one of our groups was saying, when it gets to 11 o'clock, which was always the time that they got some kind of sweet treats at boarding school, she has a craving for something sweet. It's kind of
Wow.
wired
Isn't
into
that
the head.
interesting?
Isn't it
Yeah.
interesting? And until that becomes a sort of conscious, oh God, I'm noticing that now. I wonder where that comes from. Oh, I know where that comes from now. Until we sort of do that work, we can just be driven and pulled to repeat these behaviors.
I
Yeah.
did, by
So
the way, get into a habit like that before. So when I used to be a teacher, this is before I knew anything about low carb. I used to go to the little break station where I used to set up the break time for the school. It's about like 11:15 or something. And so I
mhm.
started going getting a pastry, and it became one off. And then the next day I fancied it again. By about day 3 and 4, I was hungry 5 minutes before that time, because I was telling myself, and my body was getting used to, oh, here we go. We always eat that pastry at this time. And then it's a case of, I need it. I have to have it. And it's just became a cycle. So in the end, I thought, I'm going to have to stop this, because it's just really,
Yeah.
really bad to go and eat a piece of pizza every single 11:15 or whatever, especially for someone like with my insulin resistance. But it was hard. And I think, yeah, if you're a kid and you get into that routine, that must have a much more long lasting impact on you.
That's such a perfect example, Dan. And it's because actually we become we're so easily trained as human beings, aren't we?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
those of you with dogs will know how easily they're trained around food. I mean, they're very kind of food orientated as well. And what you get is, that habit effect, that actually just the thought and looking at your watch and thinking it's nearly 11 o'clock, and the thought, oh, I'm going to have that cake, that gets the whole dopamine thing going. And once dopamine's going, that's what's driving cravings that we talked about last week. So, that compulsion, that you're feeling, like you say, it's almost impossible not to go, isn't it? And it really takes a
Yeah.
big effort to say, right, engage frontal lobes. Having cake every day is really bad for me for whatever reason. You're putting on weight, or you feel rubbish, or your blood pressure is going up. I'm going to need to stop now. I'm going to need some strategies, and I'm going to be super determined, and I'm starting on Monday, kind of thing. So you're completely right. That's a great example. So we've talked about dopamine there, but there's other things going on as well in the brain. And I mentioned last week the little book that I wrote, Fork in the Road. Again, this is explained a little bit more in the book. And I love a little acronym. So this week's one is DOSE, right? And DOSE stands for dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. So we'll
So
go
this is like a hormonal cocktail that we're having. I like it.
It's a cocktail that when we eat sugars and carbohydrates, gets released in the brain. And your people will perhaps recognize that all of those things are the feel good neurotransmitters one way or another. We'll explain a little bit more about each one. But so what we're doing as people with sugar addiction problems is that we're dosing ourselves up, literally dosing ourselves to get those feel good neurotransmitters from the sugar, because they get released when we have the sugar. And when we come to episode 4, we'll be talking about how else, apart from the food, because we all need these things, how else can we get our dose? Because there's lots of evidence-based ways of doing that, probably that most people are already aware of, but we can definitely do more. And that's a big part of our sustained sort of recovery as food addicts. We need to not just cut out the foods, but we need to, give our brains the stuff that it's looking for in other ways. Okay, so dose. So dopamine we've talked about. It's the motivation neurotransmitter. It's the habit transmitter, and it's involved in addiction because it gives us these cravings to do certain things. The primitive brain thinks it's helping you to survive by sending you to the donut counter at 11 o'clock, when they put them out, they're coming out. I don't know what's happened. The lady's going to put the plate out or something. And,
I love the way my brain's saying, you're going to die if you don't get that donut. And I'm going, yeah, okay.
I'm just being led along. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, survival, guys. We've got to do it. We've just got to do it.
You and I would have absolutely known. We'd been looking at our watches. We'd know that the lady in the blue apron came out with the plate at 11 o'clock, sometimes a little bit earlier, and we'd probably been first in the queue. We'd been kind of hanging
that's
around.
a shocking thing. Okay, I'm embarrassed to admit this now, but because I was a teacher in the school and I did be on a free period before that break, of course I could be there before all the kids, not queuing. I mean, that's embarrassing, isn't it? Really? Quick, get before the kids turn up and go and get my addictive foods. Oh, it's shocking, but that is true. Yeah, you're right.
Then, it's such a fantastic example, and it really illustrates all these points. And
how do you know me so well? It's really embarrassing.
It's me too. It's me too, Dan. We're in the same club.
Kindred spirits in this addiction stuff. Yeah, I agree.
That would be me. I mean, I'm even a bit like that now with my good food, my good low carb, meals.
Yeah.
I know when I want it. I tend to do all the cooking, so I'm in control of it. I know when I want it. I don't like people to be late. Anyway, we'll go into that. But so dopamine, yeah, and this is gives us the cravings and so on. And we said last time, so what happens is you get this big boost of dopamine from these unnatural foods, these Franken foods like donuts. They're not. We didn't evolve eating donuts. There wasn't any. There was a bit of honey. And there were tiny fruits. Honey was the biggest boost.
And
we
very
would have
seasonal as well, right? I mean,
seasonal.
Yeah.
Seasonal,
Yeah.
very occasional. So we got these massive boosts in dopamine. And as I've explained, that drove us to be able to find more of it and feel invincible and pursue it and so on. Right. So we get that. The brain doesn't really like. It's like the whole body, we know about homeostasis and balance. It's a bit like insulin. We don't want too much of it. We don't want too much blood sugar. The body's always trying to rebalance itself and get its salts right. And the brain doesn't want this massive amount of dopamine over a long period. So what does it do but knock out a few dopamine receptors so that even though there's a lot of dopamine in the brain, it's not sending signals, if you like. It has the power taken away from it because the brain's knocked out a few dopamine receptors. And what does that explain? That explains why we need more and more to get the same effect. So where we're chasing the dopamine high, we need more because the brain's actually dampened down your receptors, so you're not receiving those messages.
Wow.
Wow. And obviously that's the same in any addiction. And obviously that's not a great idea because we need dopamine to be at a good level for motivation, for feeling motivated to do things in life. So it explains two things actually that we were talking about last week. One is that you need more and more to get the same effect, so that tolerance effect. And the other is that other activities come to be neglected because we're chasing the dopamine high from the sugar and we forget about all the other ways of getting it, if you like. So we're digging ourselves into a hole. And we'll talk about serotonin in a minute, but serotonin's the other happy hormone, isn't it? And it's basically the same thing that happens with serotonin, that you're actually depleting the actual availability of serotonin. And I think people know that serotonin's the main chemical in antidepressant drugs. It's the thing we think we need to try and boost when people are depressed. And it's absolutely the case that people on high sugar diets are more depressed.
Wow. So can I just say then, so it's almost like, and I might have misunderstood you, so I just want to just clarify. Is it almost like a bit like insulin resistance, that these other hormones, the body has more of a resistance to them after a while because the body, I mean, and I'd like to know from a survival point of view how that works, but is that premise correct, that the body has almost like a resistance to those things because it gets rid of its receptors so it can't feel those things as much because it's too much for it? Is that right?
Yes, in the brain, yes. The
My mind is blown. My God.
Blown. Yeah.
So it's almost, why does that do that, do you think? What do you think the reason for the body to do that is? Is it because it's like, look, we're getting too much dopamine, this is getting unhealthy, we're getting too confident, too happy, we need to be a bit more sensible. What's going on, I wonder?
Is that, yes, and do we even know the answer to that? It's a fantastic question. Do we even know the answer? Is there something to do? I'm only chucking it out there, but we know this sort of people have problems with cyclical moods, don't we? Sort of bipolar type folks who can go too high and then too low, and whether there's, and in fact there's some evidence that keto diets can help with that, actually can help with these shifting moods, if you like. Sugar's just very bad for the brain, isn't it? Let's all just agree that. But I don't exactly know the answer to your question. So that's D, and then O is oxytocin. Oxytocin is the lovely,
my favorite hormone. I love this hormone because you know what, having when you go through like when my wife was pregnant, and you think about oxytocin a lot, and also I'm very aware of it in me now. Whenever I read a story to my kids at night, it's all cuddly under blankets. I get such a that feeling of just I could just sleep and relax, and it's just lovely, isn't it? A feeling to have,
Isn't that wonderful? Yeah. And pets, stroking your cat or your dog, or giving your partner whatever it is, the closeness hormone. Yeah, as you say, it's involved in pregnancy and breastfeeding, and it's a lovely feeling. Also gets released when we eat sugar and carbohydrates, and also when we stretch the stomach lining. So that when you've had a big meal and you have the comforty, sleepy feeling from that. And it's
too old, Jen.
why some of us have another thing which isn't absolutely understood yet, but is definitely a thing for a lot of us, which is this volume addiction. So that even when we eating keto and low carb, we still overeat because we love that super stuffed stretch feeling of the stomach that gives you this serotonin, oxytocin, I beg your pardon. So so dopamine, oxytocin's involved. Serotonin I've already mentioned, it's a similar thing. So there's another interesting thing here that you'll understand. So we've mentioned insulin. So when we have sugar and carbohydrate, our insulin goes up because we're trying to clear the blood of the blood sugar, because it's damaging. We don't want that high blood sugar. So insulin up to get the blood sugar down. There's an interesting thing that goes on when insulin is high, and that's that tryptophan, which is an amino acid. So you digest protein into amino acids. There's a particular amino acid called tryptophan, which is the precursor. It's getting a bit technical now. It's the precursor to serotonin. So you can't make serotonin without tryptophan. And under normal circumstances, the flow of tryptophan into the brain is as kind of steady. It's competing with other amino acids to get in. It's a kind of, slow burn. When we have high insulin, tryptophan gets much more easily into the brain. I don't know the exact mechanism, but it does. So, and then tryptophan gets converted into serotonin. So high insulin, higher serotonin temporarily, but then of course you get that rebalance effect where you need more and more to get the same effect, and that all becomes depleted. So that's
you know what though, I don't know what's going to come in the last part of the E yet, but I'm just kind of feeling like we're kind of set up to fail a little bit here biologically, aren't we? So what you've said so far is having a nice full stomach with lots of food in it, having lots of sugar, and having to have more and more and more of it to get that feeling again, plus a high insulin release, all leads to happy feelings. I mean, that's I can see from an evolutionary point of view why that's so essential, but that's, as an individual, that feels like, oh my word, the odds are really stacked against me here, aren't they?
Yes, they are. And that's why it's not our fault, isn't it? Because the odds are really stacked against us in the world that we live in, which is this crazy moment in time after millions of years of evolution. We're in this kind of crazy food environment. I think so much craziness has been normalized. So much.
I totally agree with that. Yeah.
So much.
And also the shape of people as well has become normalized too. So people's body shape, people's behavior has become the norm. So that it's now abnormal to lose the weight. It's now abnormal to think you could do something about diabetes, which is not medicine. And it's also seen as abnormal to like fast or just, whatever.
Yeah, to live sugar-free is actually seen as a little bit, oh gosh.
Radical.
Radical. Should we go on to, we'll go on to E then, because we've done
to E, yes.
Serotonin's definitely the happiness one, and as I say, it's the one involved with the antidepressants, and we definitely want that in our lives. We just don't want to get it in this way. E is endorphins, which you will have heard of. So these are the kind of sort of natural painkillers, and the sort of that sort of that invincible elation sort of feeling. People talk about runner's high, don't they? That's endorphins when they've, they're kind of running along, they feel like they could kind of rule the world. So it's also we get endorphins when generally, actually, because again, it's a survival mechanism that we need to get pleasure from eating, and that's fine. That's fine. We just don't want these the kind of massive levels, and so we need to get endorphins in our life. And again, we'll come back to all of these in episode 4, how to get your dose, your dopamine, your oxytocin, your serotonin, your endorphins in different ways, so your brain's happy and you're not having to turn to food, which is our natural tendency, to get those things. So we will be coming back to that.
Well, that's great. Can I just say, though, that is really exciting for me, because I feel like you get told these foods or this behavior, you just can't do it anymore. And the alternative is desolation. I'm being a bit dramatic, but I think I kind of feel that way. Like, so here we have happiness, but it's got a massive price tag associated with your health and everything. So the alternative is misery. Great. That's sustainable forever. But I think it's really important what you just said there, that actually these hormones are natural to feel, and they're a natural part of who you are. They're actually part of you, aren't they? So you can still have the release in a much healthier way, in a way that's actually going to be sustaining and life-giving, and not be feeding the addiction, which actually just makes these things harder to feel. Because I've heard this time and again. People say they give up the sugar, and they give up, for instance, Netta Gorman talks about this, and I love what she says. She used to treat herself like a child by rewarding herself with chocolate, and that was her treat to herself. And then she realized, hang on a minute, I can actually go for a walk or spend time with my family, or do something else which would actually give her the same feeling. And maybe she's actually more sensitive to it now, so it's even stronger, and not have to put it through a substance like chocolate. And I think when people can make those changes, that's a real positive story of hope, how it doesn't have to be desolation. It can actually be a much more wonderful, fulfilling life that you're living.
I think it's so hard for people on at the beginning and on this side of the wall, if you like, because that's what they see. They see desolation on the other side of the wall. But actually, those of us who've got over the wall can sort of look back over and say, it's actually really good over here, because you've lost things that we talked about last time, the cravings, the always needing more, the being obsessed with it, the not wanting to get involved in other activities, the fact yourself, you're doing yourself harm, and you kind of ashamed, and all of that you're liberated from. And I think until you've taken these steps and got to that place, when we first talk to people about it's an addiction, what are your drug foods, and how are you going to live without them, you get this it's a horrible thought. We're attached to it. We feel bad, and there's a kind of denial. We go through those stages of grief, don't we? Denial. That's not me. I'm not a food addict. I don't need to do that. I can cope. I can manage and only eat a couple of biscuits at any one time. Probably not. Let's be honest with ourselves.
I think that's exactly it. You're right.
Denial, and then what's the next one? Anger. No, it's not. I'm never giving up.
How dare you take away my fun? Yeah.
How dare you take away my fun? And then a kind of bargaining. Well, I'll do it, but I'm not giving up my dark chocolate or my peanut butter or whatever. I'm going to bargain about what I can keep and what I can't. And then there's this kind of acceptance and moving on. Finally, usually when we've had a few slips, trips, and falls, I always like to say, how do we learn to ride a bike? By falling off, don't we? So all of us have our, even many years into recovery, have our slips, trips, and falls, and we have to learn from them. And that's another thing we'll talk about in the last episode is how do we, what should be our attitude to lapses and relapses, and how we learn from them to move forward. So Yeah.
Fantastic. So just to let all the listeners know that there are another 2 episodes coming up, plus we have a live conversation. So this is a bit of housekeeping quickly. If you'd like to ask Jen a question about what you've heard in today's episode, or maybe the other episodes in this series about addiction, then we have a live show on the 10th of May. That'll be a Zoom or a streamed event online, but you're more than welcome to come and join us. And if you do want to find out more about that, just go to the Facebook group UK Low Carb, or if you probably just email me, dan@uklowcarb.com. If you just email me, you want the link sent back, I'll happily do that for you if you're not on Facebook, because I know not everybody is. But if you are on Facebook, I'll just put the link in there and you can just join on the conversation. And we have a conference coming up, don't we, Jen? So with the conference that's coming up, what's the date for the conference again?
May the 20th in Bristol.
May the 20th in Bristol. There are tickets that are on sale at the moment for people to go, but I've actually purchased from Jen 5 tickets, and I'm going to give these out to listeners. So I know that sometimes the conferences, you might not be able to go for financial reasons or time reasons, but if it is financial, I've got you covered there. So all you need to do is get yourself to Bristol for the 20th of May. And the way you can win one of those tickets is very simple. If you just like to leave a review for this show, UK Low Carb, on Apple Podcasts or maybe Spotify, I know Apple Podcasts certainly, take a screenshot, email it to me, and I'll send it back to you. And I'll literally do the first 5. You can even, this is how kind I'm being here, you can even leave a bad review if you really want to. I don't mind. Just leave a review, and then I will send you the ticket in the post, and then you can go, well, it's a digital one, I imagine, so you can then attend that completely paid for by me. Okay, so thank you so much, Jen, for today's episode. Just a little sneak peek then, what we talk about next week.
Next week it's all about the food, our favorite topic.
yeah, story of my life, that. Okay, so all about the food next week. Fantastic. Until then, everyone, have a lovely week, and we'll see you next Tuesday. Bye, Jen, and bye everyone else.